morning with the co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Trade Depot. He's also the Chief Executive Officer of Africa Trade Engine, Mr. Onyekachi Izukane, right here in the studio. Mr. Izukane, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Trade is an interesting conversation these days, especially since we saw that Nigeria's trade, intra-African trade has increased, and even Nigeria's trade within the continent, that has increased by more than 620 billion. I think that's the number that we saw, even though South Africa is still leading. And can we connect all of this to e-commerce, or is it beyond that?
No, it's way beyond that. I think it's useful to give some context, right? Today, intra-Africa trade, which is trade between African countries or African countries trading with themselves, is still less than 15% of trade on the continent. Those numbers are really very low, right? For context, in Europe, within the European bloc, it's more than 70%. So what you want is a continent that is trading with itself. You want a region that more than external trade, is trading with itself. And so there is really quite a bit of distance to cover. E-commerce has been useful, but in real terms, e-commerce really is a very small contributor. It's less than 1% contribution to the commerce going on the continent. The conversations around intra-African trade, I think, go way beyond issues of which medium trade is happening through. I think the fundamental thing is, first of all, how much production do you have? You can't sell what you don't make, right? Once you are producing, ramping up your production, I would imagine, is the first step if you're really looking to ramp up the trade that you have within this trade bloc.
So when you talk about ramping up production, I know I had a conversation yesterday when you talk about ramping up production, for instance, in agriculture, we're referring to things like mechanized farming, but everybody's connecting it to funding anyway. So whether it's in agriculture or not, ramping up production would require funding, yes?
So everything requires funding.
I know, right?
So I reckon, instead of thinking about funding as an obstacle, you think about it as a component of what you have to do to get where you're going anyways. Ramping up production, let's think about it in terms of industrialization, right? How much of what you eat, clothe yourselves in, use on your bodies, etc., are produced locally, are produced within factories and facilities around you? That is really the point, right? And it's an exercise all of us can take, get into your fridge, get into your pantry, get into your bathroom cupboard, and look at the products you have there. Just look at them and see where they are produced. You will find that a significant amount of stuff that can be made here is not, right? Now, we see a lot of investment and capital going into building local industrial capacity. You have industrial parks popping up across the continent now, very targeted missions funded by Afrexim Bank, AFC, and other institutions. But, that is a useful step. The additional step is, how are these industrial hubs and these production facilities connected to the market? Because market access is the end goal for production. If you're making products and you want that exercise to be sustainable, you need to be able to evacuate that to where consumers can buy them. And that is what, as the Africa Trade Engine, we have focused on doing, right? Connecting, integrated architecture, right, to connect production capacity with digital market access.
Well, how much of a challenge is market access on the continent? Because market is available. The market is available.
Yeah, so you could argue that market access is one of the biggest challenges you have.
Really?
Yes.
Is it because of infrastructure?
It's because of how fragmented distribution and retail space is, on the one hand. It's also because of how disconnected cross-border activity is in our environment. It is today more expensive and hectic to get a product across the West African zone, say from Lagos to an Accra, than it is to get it from a port in China to Lagos, right? And then there's a bunch of other different, non-tariff barriers that you have to navigate. So there are certainly a lot of frictions when it comes to market access. Frictions related to getting it from one country to another, but also frictions within countries to get it from one place to another. And these are practical problems, but that have real solutions, right? And that is what the focus for us is. How do you leave talking about these problems and get into trying to solve them?
Getting to solve them, that's a big deal because, you know, when you said, well, moving it, yesterday I had a guest who said that he carried out an experiment moving products from Lagos to Banjul, took about 90 days. But if you want to drive on leisure to Banjul, I think he said about 14 days. So, I mean, how many commodities can you keep on the road for 90 days that will not have negative impacts and all of that? And then it's beyond that, as you said. Even bringing commodities from the northern part of Nigeria to the southern part of Nigeria, I can imagine what you have to face. And now the insecurity issue is getting heightened, and that only makes it even more difficult. So it seems that there's a whole lot to do if we would actually deal with this access to markets.
It's a significant problem, and it's an urgent one, and there is a lot to do. But you know,
so where do we start
you have to start somewhere.
Exactly.
I think that is the point. And so here is where we're starting. So Trade Depot, which is a company I've led for the last 7 years, has really focused on using technology as a platform to enable distribution and last mile access, right? That has meant engaging with the retailers who are the final point before consumers get the product, to digitize them so you can capture demand from these retailers, but also you're able to supply them in an efficient way, right? And then working with brands to bring products into the markets, navigate issues related to, you know, border movement, etc., to make sure that you can drop prices realistically for consumers. Now, our partner in the Africa Trade Engine, TRT Manufacturing, is one of the largest contract manufacturers on the continent, and they've spent a lot of time setting up regional production hubs across Africa. What this union between Trade Depot and TRT means is that you have that production expertise getting directly connected to digital market access. It's valuable for several reasons. One, it helps evacuation so that when you're making products, you know where it's ending up. But very importantly, you have that feedback loop. You have data from the market informing what you're making and how much of it you're making, right? So that ultimately you're running an entire value chain that has less friction and ensures that consumers can get products at lower prices.
But you still have issues like insecurity because those products are physical and they will still have to move from one place to the other. So you still have those hurdles, government agencies, taxation, and insecurity, infrastructure, and logistics along that line. So you still have those things to deal with.
I mean, realistically, you have to treat all those as features of your environment, not bugs at this point, because it is what it is, right? And they are not impossible to navigate. Obviously, we all want things to be better than they are today. But given where we are right now, the question always has to be, what do we do now, right? Issues of supply chain sovereignty, they are not problems that we can wait to solve 20 years from now or 10 years from now or at some fictitious future time when everything is great. It really needs to be about us looking at the problems we have, finding solutions that allow us. People have to feed today. People have to get clothed today. So we need to figure out how to start acting now, and that is the approach we're taking at the Africa Trade Engine.
All right, thank you so much, Chief Executive Officer of Africa Trade Engine and also co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Trade Depot, Mr. Onyekachi Izukane. Thank you for your time on the program.
Thanks for having me.